for really effective mentoring, you need to challenge and encourage. Those are both necessary. But if you can challenge someone to think deeply about something that matters, about something they're struggling with, whatever it may be, or their personal growth, their career growth, and then encourage that, you can't lose. It moves the needle on mentoring.
All right, you're listening to Being Built. I'm here with Brian Raison, professor at Ohio State University. And the Ohio State
University.
Right. You teach leadership, and you've done research and all kinds of other teaching in your history. But I was particularly intrigued by your recent work on mentoring. That's the invitation to the show. Oh, yeah, and by the way, I'm Aaron Davis, founder of Reliant Search Group and host of the show. So you wrote this book recently about mentoring, and that's what I'm like, oh, what's this guy up to? And I was curious about where that all came from and thought we should have a conversation about it.
Cool. Yeah.
So I'm confused by your association to the university. You work in the agriculture school, but you teach leadership?
It's a long and complicated.
Makes sense.
No, it's actually not. So Aaron, I'd probably describe myself as an unlikely professor.
Okay.
Undergrad business degree, and then I was done with school forever until 10 years later. And I was kind of working and trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I was in the Fortune 500 back then in industry. And I now can articulate what was happening to me. I didn't know it at the time. I had no idea. I just knew that something wasn't right. And so I quit. and my it's kind of funny. My family just all thought I was nuts because I had a pretty nice paying job, very nice paying
mortgage
job
to go with it, right?
Actually, I was single, no dependents.
Okay,
so I did have a Saab 900 turbo.
Okay,
and, but
so you
anyway,
weren't in a bad position to make a change.
So there's an economist at Yale, James Choi, and he says, you'll not find a scarcity of opportunity as you move through your career. What you'll likely discover is a scarcity of meaning. And I had no idea how to articulate that or even think about that. I just knew that I was enjoying the work, I was enjoying the paycheck, but I was bored. I don't know what I was. And so I quit and I went camping. Okay. I was going to do that just for a few weeks or a month. It turned into almost a year, and I started doing volunteer work. We were working with a church organization, and I started discovering sort of other things in life, and I was like, this is kind of cool. Then I ran out of money, so I had to go back to school.
You remember, this is
or get a job.
Okay.
Yeah. So I said, well, I found a job in the paper with the Agricultural Extension Service. And I had heard of it. So, the 4-H program, most people do. So
most people in the Midwest.
Most people in the Midwest.
I didn't know about it when I grew up in San Diego, but yeah, I get it.
Although UC Davis has an extension program. They have 4-H, and they do a lot with agriculture.
Okay.
In fact, I'm mentoring a junior faculty member at UC Davis right now, and he's doing some really cool stuff with cooperatives. And so anyway, so I applied for the job and I got it, and I started doing basically non-formal education, which is the extension outreach. So in 1862, quick history, I'll be quick. The Land Grant Act was passed by Congress at the end of the Civil War, and the charge was to start these universities that would extend education to everybody.
Okay.
And so before that, it was only the elite people with means and money and everything else that could get a college education and further their knowledge, their life, their skill sets, and that sort of thing. So that has persisted. And so Ohio State is the land grant university in Ohio. Purdue is the Indiana. Cornell is the New York.
Okay, interesting.
Mississippi State down south. The state universities are the land grants. And our job, there's still a department in each of those universities called Extension that extends the knowledge, the research. And it was originally rooted in agriculture. And so that's the reason I'm in the College of Agriculture because I started working for this thing. But we also do 4-H youth development. So we're trying to grow leaders for the future. We do a lot of family and consumer science work where we're teaching families how to improve their their nutrition,
Okay.
and their meal planning and their home budgets.
So that's how you got into food research and local food supply.
And then community development is my area. So I work with a lot of nonprofits, with local governments. I do a lot of strategy work on strategic planning, strategic alignment to help organizations build their capacity within so they can reach their mission attainment. So it's about that. So Extension gave me the job. They let me go back to school. And the next thing you know, I applied for a job to be a faculty member. Before I was an educator, but not a faculty member.
Okay.
And that's when I began then teaching on campus and kind of moved through the faculty ranks of tenure and full professor and all that madness. So I'm a very unlikely professor because I would have never. I grew up in Southern Ohio, down on the river, and there's no
sounded like a Chris Farley skit. You're not going to jump on my coffee table, are you?
Never would have.
Have you seen that skit? It's like Chris Farley pretending to do a motivational speech, and then he throws himself on the coffee table.
It's been a minute, anyway, but I have. Yes, you're not going to
Saturday Night Live skit for me.
So I'm like passionate about trying to help other people. And we are in the helping profession. Yeah, I teach formally on campus. I have mostly grad students.
Okay.
And again, as you mentioned, I teach leadership theory and practice. I teach strategic planning and program planning. I teach how to teach.
Okay.
So I do a kind of a broad variety. And I have an undergrad section that I teach just because I love to look at young people and try to recognize their potential. And I'm telling you, and you know this, everybody you meet knows something that you don't know.
Yeah, true.
Every single person. And so if you kind of Edgar Schein, Humble Inquiry, 1980 or so, I can't remember the date on the citation, but he said, if we can humbly approach life, then we can learn and grow and improve, and so that I love that sort of thing.
That's how you got into it, huh?
Yeah.
A 7-year-old who you just met was he was asking me something a couple of weeks ago about, do you know more than so and so? And I was trying to explain to him, because he's like, how authoritative are you, Dad?
How much do you know, Dad?
And I'm trying to explain to him that, like, at some point, it's not more than, it's more perspective. And communicating that to a 7-year-old was difficult. But what it came down to was me, explaining to him how many things I've learned about sharks from him, right? Because he's like into it. He reads books about sharks and natural disasters, and those are, intrigues of his. So he knows more about those things because he actually reads books about them and I don't, right? Yeah. And so he was like, oh yeah, I know more than my dad.
So how do we approach our colleagues, the people we manage? How do we approach our leadership positions, wherever we may be? Do we have that curiosity to think about, what do they know that I don't, or what perspective might they have that I'm so clouded because of my role or my time constraints? I mean, what you talk about opening doors and opportunity is having that. Yeah, it's a changed perspective.
It really is kind of a fresh look at knowledge. And I spent most of my career in corporate world where you've done your time as well, but so firsthand the difference. What happens is you have these kind of hierarchies of knowledge and middlemen and all this kind of stuff. But I have heard that it's said, and you can either confirm, deny, or qualify this, but that there's no more humble room than a room full of PhD professors, each with their own specialty, because everybody is fully aware of how little they know about all these other things.
Yes and no. So there are two. So
qualify that.
I'll qualify it.
Okay.
So I tell my graduate students this, particularly my PhD students. And in fact, just yesterday I was writing a candidacy exam question for one, and trying to challenge her, trying to beat AI so that she couldn't just throw it into a bot and generate.
Right.
But anyway, so when you graduate with your PhD, you have two options. You can either realize that you can either think, oh, I know everything now because I have arrived. I have letters after my name. Or you can realize the truth, which is I know a lot about this little tiny thing. And there is so much more that I do not know. It's mind-blowing. And so So again, that humble approach of, oh my goodness, wow. I mean, I spent, so in my dissertation, I used a theoretical framework from, oh shoot, it's going to go out of my head right now. Everett Rogers, 1956, The Diffusion of Innovations Theory. A lot of people have heard of the diffusion of innovations. In fact, Sinek talks about it in his Start With Why talk, the 2009 one that he did. Yeah, he talks about the diffusion of innovations, where you have early adopters and then the majority and then the laggards at the end. Anyway, I use that theory as part of my research and part of my writing. And so I probably spent a month reading his books, reading the critiques, reading the iterations of that research. And then when I finished, I realized, oh my gosh, I need to go to this guy's grave and apologize, because I'm professing that I know something about the diffusion of innovations, and I spent maybe 2 or 3 months on it. He spent 30 years.
Wow. Yeah.
I mean, what do I know? I don't know anything. So anyway.
You speak about humility in your book, The Encouraging Mentor, and how important it is for a mentor to approach mentoring with humility. Maybe intuitively we think the mentor would be the person with answers.
I teach a 3-hour seminar on the difference between coaching and mentoring. And I do that we have a thing called the Leadership Center at Ohio State. And we have some certificate programs and et cetera. And I'll get people from across the university, from the med school, from private industry that come and attend this. And so I try to differentiate what is the difference between coaching and mentoring. With coaching, a lot of times we're thinking about giving someone some information to help them improve, to get over that hurdle, or to clear the bar, whatever that may be. So a lot of times it might be technique, it might be a process, it might be an idea. With mentoring, we're asking questions, and that's where the humble inquiry comes in. If we take the position of, hey, there's opportunity for me to learn along with the mentee, yeah, we may have more experience and we may have some lived wisdom, but they also have experience and wisdom and a different perspective and different life experiences that they bring to it. And so that's the adult learning theory. So that's Malcolm Knowles, 1984. Sorry, I'm going to sit here and just quote citations. That's what I do.
Yeah. I'm so much more lazy when it comes to learning. I do not remember or give credit to where I learned from. Sorry, everybody smart before me.
It's all good. It's all good.
Yeah, good job on the citations. That's interesting. The first question that came to my mind is, why does that matter? Why is it important to ask the right questions? And one is, I would presume it's about kind of creating a welcome environment where whatever you have to give is welcome, to that person. And if it doesn't feel like it's a challenge or it's insulting or belittling, I presume that's helpful. But why else is it important in a mentoring relationship to be asking the questions as opposed to just sharing good advice or good answers?
That's a really perceptive question, and you're hitting on it. You're answering it actually as you speak it. So if I tell you something, if I give you some information, well, that's fine and that's cool. And when you're in 8th grade chemistry, you need the teacher, the teacher, to give you some information because you're learning, you're absorbing, and so it's kind of a one-way dissemination of information. As we move into adulthood and we start thinking about the difference between pedagogy, which is youth or learning, versus andragogy, which is adult education, adult learning theory, adults bring all of this stuff with them. Biggest thing they bring is a different reason to learn. They're learning because they want to, or they may need to further their career, to understand a process or a problem, whatever it may be. So their motivations are different. So we could jump into motivation there, but that's off the topic.
It seems like a deep well we could swim in there.
It's fascinating. So one way to affect adult learning is inquiry. And it's much more powerful than me just telling you something. If I ask you the question, you think about it, and then you come up with an answer, or you start batting around it, or hitting around the ballpark, and then we start honing in on it or homing in. then it's going to, the transfer of learning is going to occur in your mind and be much more strong than if I just say, there's the data, period. Then you're going to say, okay, that's a piece of data. Great. I get it. And then you may or may not remember it. You may or may not, you might use it one time. But if you have thought about it and we've conversed about it and you have come to it or arrived at it and even helped construct it, then it's going to be much more cemented in your mind, and it's going to be a more powerful learning experience.
Yeah, so it's about creating sticky connections in your mind.
Yeah.
When you
Neural
have that aha
pathways.
moment, it's a little high, right? It's a little connection. It's a little enthusiasm you have for making a realization, right?
Yeah.
You know what it just reminded me of, Brian? Well, something Jesus said from way back when.
Yeah, way back.
When I used to read different content. But I remember it reminded me of teacher, why do you speak in parables or whatever? And Jesus said, so that those who have ears hear and those who have eyes see. And, the depth of that lesson is so underappreciated, I think, when you really when you just read it in the spiritual sense and you don't think about the psychological value of that as well. Like, letting people who want to see, and people who are really listening with depth, figuring out a story and putting it together creates a deep, sticky connection, right? And anyway, you just reminded me. Of that. I hadn't heard that in a long time, but you just reminded me of that.
So ancient literature, I read it a lot. I certainly read biblical texts and ancient Jewish writings. And Buddhist philosophy. I mean, there are some the Quran, there's some great stuff out there. There's some wisdom that we can capture from 1,000-year-old texts, 6,000-year-old texts. And it's very applicable to today. Yeah. One of my absolute favorites, and I just jumped, it's a sidetrack, but I'll throw it out there. What's it called? Numbering Your Days. So His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu wrote a book called The Book of Joy.
Really? Okay.
It's fascinating. 2016.
Okay.
I got the citations today.
Well done. You're killing it.
So in the Book of Joy, the question is, how do you find joy in your life? That kind of goes back to the scarcity of meaning that Choi talks about from Yale versus opportunity. There's plenty of opportunity. How do you find meaning? There's a ton of social science research. Abrams is the co-author on this, and he's a Jewish guy. So you've got a Buddhist, a preacher, and a Jewish guy. Sounds like a setup for a joke.
Right? They're all in a raft or something.
It's fascinating. So it boils down to one thing: the research and the ancient wisdom says, serve other people. So they've just moved from. So it's the whole existential question: why do I exist? What's the purpose of life? That is the oldest question, perhaps. Stephen Covey talked about it in 7 Habits way back. He said, stop reading this book and pause for a moment or an hour and write down how you want to be remembered. Write your own obituary. Kind of a heavy-duty thing. But when we do that, we start to strip away some of the non-essentials and focus on what actually matters. So the Jewish wisdom literature says, number your days. Number your days. So what does that mean? That means focus on what matters. Realize that you have a finite end at some point. We don't know when that might be. But if we think about that, even though it sounds a little bit morbid to think about dying, the Dalai Lama, Desmond Tutu, Abrams say that actually re-energizes us because we can say no to those items that are less important. We can say yes to the things that are more important. And that's Covey as well. It's Covey says it's easy to say no when there's a larger yes looming in the background. So it all gets down to what's most important. Is that our family, our faith, our having fun, our work, doing so. And don't get me wrong, there is meaningful work in answering the phone and being the front person in an office. My goodness, perhaps that is one of the most meaningful things because you are the face of the company when people come in or the organization, whatever it may be. oh my goodness, that person can make or break an experience for somebody.
Yeah.
They can change somebody's day. They can change the entire perception of that organization. Mm-hmm. It's fascinating.
That's so true.
Critical people, yeah.
I feel like
all levels.
I feel like I've had days warmed because of a humanity or a connection that I made with somebody on a customer support call. I can recall just being, hey Larry, how's your day going, man? How you doing? Like saying that to a customer service person, they're like, oh, you recognize that I'm a person, even though you're upset about this bill or whatever, right? And then you have this exchange. It is wild how little it takes sometimes to make somebody's day great.
So here's something that's interesting about this. Mm-hmm. And this is, you asked me about the book. I forgot about it.
Yeah.
So this is one of the things that I mentioned is that when we pause to encourage other people, mm-hmm. two things happen. One, there's an outright, message that we're sending of saying, hey, hang in there. This isn't easy. It may not end immediately, but better days are coming. Mm-hmm. We can persevere. You can persevere. So that's the outright first piece. The second piece is when they receive that, you realize, and your brain neurotransmitters, the dopamine fires, that you have done something nice mm-hmm. for someone else. Mm-hmm. What did the Dalai Lama say?
That creates
How
joy.
do you get joy?
Yeah.
Serve other people. Mm. So that encouragement, and that's the reason I named the book The Encouraging Mentor. I want mentoring to not just be I'm going to give you some advice, son. It's let's learn together. Let me ask you some questions based on some of my experiences.
Not just a transaction of knowledge, but a transaction of joy and empowerment.
I mean, I might take that.
Yeah, you can have it. I mean, that's what you're saying, right? In a roundabout way.
It is.
And that's really powerful. That's so much more than like some prescribed class or something, right?
Oh, it's very different. Very different.
You talk a little bit in the book too about the function of luck in career and in life. And that got my wheels spinning. I've had a fair amount of success, enough that, I feel very grateful. And it's tempting. I think a lot of people who build things or grow things or whatever, or chase and accomplish things, when somebody comes to them and says, oh, I've had people ask me like, oh, what's your secret to success or whatever. And it's embarrassing a little bit. And so like, I tend to like, it's not doing as great as you might think or whatever, you tend to downplay it or something. Or in my case, a lot of times I've just cited my good fortune, that I've been lucky because I'm a little put off. I think I do that by nature because I'm put off by the hard work and blah, blah, blah. And I find that sometimes just to be, not recognizing that everybody who's working for you is probably working just as hard, right? Maybe harder if they're not as well off, right? Because they got more things to do at home and all these other things. But anyway, so when I see these messages of like, oh, this sleepless nights and going hard and that's the answer. My tendency is to answer that question from my perspective is to look back and think in a grateful way about where did I get a work ethic from? Oh, well, I had the good fortune of like growing up in this family and being in the military.
Where did that come from? Yeah.
I learned these things firsthand and I got to create some habits and find some joy in that thing. How did I become to a position where I could make smart decisions and be business savvy and be people savvy and because I had this mom and I had this mentor and it's all these lucky things. You also have some brain
chemistry that's nicely balanced.
Just lucky, right? Just born with it.
You didn't pick your parents.
That's exactly right. You know what I mean? I was born in San Diego.
You weren't so smart that you chose them. Two smart people.
That's right. I was born in a wealthy country in a wealthy time, and so I look at my life and I think however you might describe it as successful, I see all the lucky things, and a lot of people. But you were kind of making an opposite point, and
what's that?
About luck and its function and your success. And so I'm curious about your take on that.
No, actually, I would say that we're really aligned. So I hear, and it's not just A and B, but I do see, or I have observed people who are very successful, mm-hmm. who will gladly tell you that they worked really hard mm-hmm. and they had ideas and brought them to fruition, and now they're, at the top. Other folks do what you just described, which is I'm like, wow, Aaron is understands that success is not a function of working really hard and arriving.
Right.
Because,
the hardest working guys in the world are poor.
Well, yeah.
Right? They move bricks from here to there.
Yeah.
Right? They work harder than me.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's, we grew up doing that kind of manual labor and that sort of thing. So I describe luck as the intersection between preparation and opportunity. So earlier I mentioned that opportunities abound, and they may be all over the board in any different area. I've gone from private industry and human resources and to education. So opportunities came along. But where I would say that I was lucky is I had done some preparation. And so I had gone back. I'd first gone to school as an undergrad, thanks to my grandmother opening a bank account for us kids when we were little. And I think when I graduated from high school, I had like $312 or something. Oh, wow. That'll not cover back then a quarter of tuition, although it was close to one quarter. But then there was room and board, and then the next 4 years. But she had a vision that she planted and encouraged us kids that this would help us move forward. So that's preparation. And I persisted. I wasn't going to. I would have dropped out on a number of occasions, but for my sisters who made me go back, they're like, Brian, get your butt back up here. You're going to finish your undergrad degree, because what else are you going to do? I'm like, well, I'm going to go to work in the steel mill or wherever where I can make some money.
I worked in a steel mill.
And buy a really nice stereo and a really nice car. And they're like, get back to school.
I think my son would prefer that I still work in a steel mill. I've shown him videos of it. He's like, whoa, that's so cool.
Oh, it is cool.
And then he sits here and watches me send emails. He's like, oh.
It's cool, but man, that's hard work.
That's a long, that's
hard, so that's days. Preparation. So I was blessed again, and I'm like you. I have taken the time to study and to think through that. I was fortunate in so many ways. Like you said, born in a country that has a good education system, a really good education system. Sure. We complain about it, but we're not bad.
We're in the top 1% in the history of the human race, right? In terms of quality of life and wealth and education, we're all essentially born into that in the U.S., right? So, relative to who, compared to who, is always the question, right?
From day one. So opportunity, you prepare, and then when those come together, you open a door, and sometimes it's the wrong door, and you don't feel so lucky. Yeah. And other times, what is that song? Sometimes I thank God for unanswered prayers. It's some country song from way back. Okay. And I think it's about a guy and his girl that doesn't, because then he meets his love of his life. Yeah, that's the idea of the song. Well, there was a job when we had young kids, and it paid double my educator's job. Okay. And I was like, man, I really, praying for this job. I didn't get it. And I knew some of the people at this company, back in the Fortune 500 again. And I'm like, man, why didn't I get this job? Well, I can't tell you how thankful I am that I didn't get that job. Lucky. I was lucky. Yeah. And so I was able to continue and then go back to school and again, do my doctorate or whatever else. And now I get to teach and to work with and coach and mentor students and fellow faculty member. I do a lot of work across the university with departments, helping them think through how to strategically align their departments and plan for their future. Well, what does that mean? Well, that means they are taking the time and investing the time to think about what matters most so that those students, the young people that are coming in, or people who are going back to school, I was old when I went back to school, can learn and grow and have more opportunity. And so that those I wouldn't be doing any of this. I am wildly blessed and thankful for the path that I've kind of accidentally taken. So that goes back to my unlikely professor. The whole thing is just a happy accident.
So do you feel like you found plenty of opportunity, which is ample? There's plenty of it out there. Do you feel like you found that scarce and you were looking for meaning in your work?
Oh, that's the best part. I mean, that is the part, and that's the reason that I haven't retired yet. My brother just retired. Yeah, and he's younger than me.
Is he?
So go figure. But we are in. So I'm an educator technically, but we're in the helping profession. So the work we do is helping to equip future generations. But you have to stop and think about that, because every day I have to get up and write a question for a PhD candidate, or grade papers, or film a lecture, or whatever it may be. You know, we have stuff we have to do. I ran into a colleague at Ohio State, and he manages some of the construction projects that are going on campus.
Okay.
And so you're talking millions of dollars here.
Yeah.
There's a lot of construction going on, like hundreds of millions of dollars are happening.
Interesting.
And he was not happy. And I'm like, dude, what's wrong? Because he just had that look. And he goes, oh, I got to go yell at a contractor. They're not getting the job done. And I said, well, what's happening? Tell me the story. He goes, well, they're behind on this and this and deliverables and our time schedule. I said, have they thought about what it means if they can get back to schedule and be on time with this project? And he goes, well, I don't know. I said, well, what if you ask them about what this project, how this project is going to end up, and what this project is going to be doing? What if you mentioned that, and it happened to be over, this is a couple years back, happened to be over at our Waterman Farm facility. So we have a working farm on campus, right in the middle of Columbus.
Interesting.
And we were building a new education center that community members, that school kids, urban kids who don't have the opportunity to see a farm or to understand where their food comes from, that they were going to be able to come there and learn and think about nutrition and healthy choices and maybe job opportunities, because there are agriculture is number one industry in Ohio. And so I said, what if you led with that? And he's like, dude. So it totally changed. Number one, it changed him, because now he wasn't mad to go yell at somebody. Now he was going to go tell a story to the contractor.
You gave him a weapon that can
and have
inspire.
a conversation and inspire him to change literally thousands of kids' lives when he gets that project on schedule and done.
Yeah. And that's really powerful.
It's perspective.
Now I got to stop and think about anytime I've ever had to challenge or critique or course correct somebody, and if I'm doing it the right way, because that way's great. I love that.
I've done it wrong for years.
Think about connecting somebody to the meaning of their work.
Well, it's the why. It's back to Simon Sinek. What's the why?
Yeah, and even back further than that, right?
Well, back to the existential. Why are we here? What's our purpose?
Yeah.
Yeah. And back to helping people.
That's right.
And having joy. I mean,
yeah.
It's powerful stuff.
It is. So back to the mentoring
Sure.
context. Got a question for you about that. Well, also, I didn't want to blow over there were a couple of other topics on your mind I know you wanted to touch on, but let's come back to that. One question that came to mind as we kind of tiptoed into the mentoring topic is what you see as, like, what's the most critical aspect of an effective mentoring relationship? What's the most important thing?
Man, that's a great question. I mean, that could be argued for months. And there have been.
I wish we had months.
There have been books, reams of paper and ink spilled.
But you've put a lot of thought into this. I think you have some authority on this, and I would love to know. And I know you don't think you know everything, but you know something.
I know. I mean, yeah,
you know
27 years at Ohio State. They haven't fired me yet.
So I'd love to know what you think is what's the biggest obstacle that people run into, or the biggest opportunity in front of people in that mentoring relationship to get it right?
I think when I stop and think about mentoring. And this is where I contextualize mentoring, the approach of non-formal mentoring. Formal mentoring programs, they can be stiff, they can be prescriptive, they can be challenging. And sometimes people don't like them because you've got a checklist and all this sort of thing. Informal mentoring, which some companies said, well, let's do informal mentoring. Well, that's having a cup of coffee or lunch. Rarely is there an evaluation of that. Rarely is there good reflection. And sometimes the topics are just random. So I've kind of taken a chapter from non-formal education theory and applied it to mentoring. And I said, what if we find a middle ground and do non-formal mentoring? And so in that, I find two things, back to your question.
Okay.
For really effective mentoring, you need to challenge and encourage. So, and those are both necessary. If you challenge somebody without encouraging them, then you're just ordering them around or giving them a problem, and you're not helping. If you encourage someone, but you don't challenge them in any way, then it's just platitudes or what I mean,
Just fluffing them up.
Meaningless, yeah. But if you can challenge someone to think deeply about something that matters, about something they're struggling with, whatever it may be, or their personal growth, their career growth, and then encourage that, you can't lose. I mean, it's a huge thing to challenge and encourage. It moves the needle on mentoring.
I like that basic framework, at the handful of things that are critical for me to do well in my life. I have those 3 bullet points or my 2-point fork or whatever, my 2-pronged fork. But to think about mentoring as being measured against that, am I encouraging and am I challenging? That helps to mitigate the informal, let's just, talk shop, gossip about whoever, give advice, call it mentoring. And
it's not
right. And you're having lunch, you're having a beer, whatever. But I mean, it ends up just being kind of a senior junior buddy relationship instead of intentionally, but just equipped with that and nothing else, encouraging, challenging, equipped with that mandate and nothing else. That transforms that buddy. Talk shop into an intent that have I accomplished one of those, each of those things. That's an immediate promotion from, informal to meaningful, right?
But not formal.
Right.
And so you don't have to worry about checking boxes on an outline, which is what I don't like to do.
One of them was the formula that you were talking about.
Oh.
I cut you off before we turned the cameras on, but I am curious about your
So
E equals what? What is the formula?
So let me think about this. Okay. I ask this question a lot of times when I'm teaching or facilitating, because I facilitate a lot of conversations, again, with some really smart people.
Okay.
So it's challenging to get their attention.
Yeah.
It's very challenging.
I believe you.
And I'm usually very nervous before I walk into a room. Maybe it's over in the College of Engineering. I've worked with a number of departments and their faculty. So I get a little nervous when I'm doing that. So what I tend to do or try to do is come up with kind of an opening engagement activity. So one of the things that I'll try is, particularly when we're talking about alignment and bringing people together to accomplish some bigger goal, maybe the mission of the department, whatever that may be. So when we're thinking about alignment, I might ask this question. So now you go ahead and respond. I'll throw it out at you.
Okay.
What do you do when somebody's tailgating you? I mean, right up on your bumper. They're right there. What do you do?
What do I do?
I
usually start murmuring under my breath. I get a little frustrated.
Yeah.
Just the other day it happened, actually. I got into the turning lane, let them pass me, and then I got behind them.
Oh.
So.
Wow. Okay. So you're in the upper 10% of my respondents. So
upper 10. Why?
So I brake check. That's the number one thing.
No,
that
I've been
people do.
rear-ended before. I don't brake check. I have no idea if
people
that
brake
person's
check.
paying attention or not.
Other people, they wave at them with one finger.
Right. Okay. I might be saying that under my breath. I'm not sure.
So quick story. This is absolutely true. This is 6 or 8 years ago, I guess. I'm driving, and I'm taking my daughter to practice her driving lessons.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we're going to like the school parking lot or the church parking lot. And I'm driving along, and the guy in front of me is just going a little slow. Uh-huh. We're in a hurry because we don't have that much time. We've got activities, right?
Sure.
I mean, a 15-and-a-half-year-old kid, there's stuff to do.
Right.
So I might have been a little close to him. Right. I might have just been a little bit close to him. Finally, he puts on his blinker to turn right and to get out of my way. So I'm ready to accelerate and move on down the road. And halfway through his turn, he brake checked me. And I was like, you, and I had to swerve just a little, not bad, but I had to hit my brakes and move over, and I thought, you.
Yeah.
I wanted to think a lot of things, and I thought, I'm not going to say anything, but I'm going to give him a look. So as I'm, and guess what he was doing? He was waving at me with one finger. And I'm not kidding you, Aaron. So this is what happened. At that second, a formula popped into my head that I've been teaching for years. E plus R equals O. A lot of people know it. A lot of people don't. So E is an event.
Okay.
An event happens. You're being tailgated. You're tailgating somebody. O is the outcome. So what does R stand for? What do you think?
Reaction?
Your reaction, right? That's what almost everybody says. And that's correct. But there's two different opportunities for the R. You can either have an R reaction or you can have an R response. The difference is simply taking a breath, pressing pause, and getting your mind in the right frame. When you do that, this was developed by a guy in California, psychologist in the 90s, I think it was, and Urban Meyer talked about it in his book, Above the Line Leadership.
Okay.
He said...
When was that written?
96, I think.
You're unbelievable, man.
I think it was. I'm not sure.
We're going to go fact check all these dates.
So the difference...
We'll give you a grade at the end of it.
I'm used to that. I have peer review, so I get checked on a regular basis. And by the way, that can be done with kindness as well. It doesn't have to be done with vitriol, which sometimes you see in the academy. Anyway, not bad, but sometimes. So Meyer describes it as above the line leadership. If the event happens and you react, that's your guttural brain saying, "What you?" But if you press pause, he's got like 6 things that he outlines that you can do to get your frame of mind right. And I have no idea what those are because I can't remember that much. But I can remember pressing pause, taking a breath and saying, wait a second. Okay, now I'm responding. Now I'm no longer just gut reaction and mad. I'm saying, what if he's or she is a younger driver or an older driver and they're not comfortable or it's a different car? What if they just got some bad news and so they're beside themselves? What if, as soon as, then now I'm humbled and I'm like, Brian, how could you be so impatient? Is your life that important that you can't just take a breath? You know, and then I'm just beating myself up. But I literally, at the moment of making a reaction, I teach this to my graduate students. I mean, literally in my graduate courses, I teach E plus R equals O. The event, your reaction or your response leads to the outcome. And here's the key that a lot of people don't think about. Your response or your reaction, whichever your R is, creates an event for somebody else. So that's
that
the
outcome, isn't it?
That's the yeah. And so which
the only difference is slowing down, letting your brain determine your emotions
and take over
the way around, and being intentional. Yeah,
it's powerful stuff.
Yeah, that really is.
It'll change your life.
I've had to, it's funny how I think I learned emotional regulation as an adult. And then, now I'm teaching it to my 7-year-old and like, oh, you're feeling this. So this is the risk. And this is how you can respond, or you can respond this way. And I'm teaching him these things that I didn't really learn. I may have learned some part of it or whatever young, but I don't remember anybody teaching those lessons to me intentionally.
Because a lot of times we don't.
Right.
We're busy teaching math or science, which is great.
Yeah, that's right.
But this is the stuff that will get us through life with some joy.
True.
Instead of getting up on Monday morning.
And healthy relationships.
And healthy relationships. Instead of getting up Monday morning thinking, I've got to go back,
My brother told me, I remember him saying, if people treated navigating your cars around the street the way they treated navigating your shopping carts around the grocery store, we'd all be better friends. It's just slightly bigger vehicles, and all of a sudden we're psychopaths.
We're psychopaths.
We are. It's like, and that guy's lives nearby. Like you're probably connected to him by 1 degree.
Oh yeah.
I mean, we're driving around in the same town or the adjacent suburbs. Like we have friends of that guy, right? And we're firing up. And I say that because the anecdote I shared was this, like I did some perfect thing or whatever, but I've been angry at drivers on the road. I know that feeling. I know that reaction. I've been there.
All the time.
Especially when somebody's tailgating me, because I have been rear-ended, so it makes me more nervous about it, right? Yeah. And so it does upset me. So I get it. But yeah, just being able to pause. I think for me, what I'm finding, my old age is just finally becoming an adult. Now that I'm close to 50, I'm like, I'm almost an adult.
Getting there.
But what I'm finding is that my emotions don't have to determine my behavior, that I can see my emotions before I see what they do. Right?
Game changer.
And if I can see my emotions instead of just waiting to see what they do, I might decide what they do instead. And it might be uncomfortable. I might not be happy about doing what I have to do, but it might have a better outcome, right?
So you just completely moved into Daniel Goleman, emotional intelligence.
Okay.
1986.
That's awesome. All right, I got one last question for you. But
it is. It's emotional intelligence, recognizing your emotions, what drives you, how you feel, and then how you respond, and then regulating that.
Yeah.
It's study up on EQ. It's also a game changer.
I've read a couple articles on it. Yeah. Certainly no professor, but enough to know that I it's what little I do know and have learned about it is important for me to help my children become better at that.
Yeah.
And not throwing a fit is not just, oh, you're in trouble, right? It's what you're experiencing now is this. This is right. And I hope I'm not messing that up.
No, you're good.
I usually end these conversations, a lot of times, a lot of these interviews, I'm talking to business leaders and that kind of thing, and you bring a different angle to this, these topics of leadership that we get into on this podcast. But so one of the things I'm curious about from your kind of body of expertise as a facilitator, communicator, educator, you've done your fair share of interviewing folks, facilitating conversations. And so I'm just winging it with this whole podcast thing. So my question to you, Brian, is what recommendation, what advice would you offer about how I ask questions to my guests going forward? What suggestions would you make? What would be a good thought to think about as I'm trying to pry out the good stuff?
That's a great question. So obviously there are a lot of techniques. There are articles and books written about interview techniques. So you could certainly go read some of those. But I've been really working to practice what I call a contributory agenda.
Okay.
So I've got a big keynote coming up here in the fall with some university leaders from across the nation. And they asked me to come and speak about non-formal mentoring and opportunities there and retention because of opportunity with changing and generational differences, and how do we keep people and that sort of thing. And I said, well, let me do this. Let me come and ask some questions and let's co-construct the answer together.
Okay.
And so in fact, I was working on it right before I came over here. I'm developing a short question route that we're going to have a conversation. And I'm not going to tell them anything. These are some of the smartest people I can't even fathom. But I'm going to ask them some questions, and then together we're going to move toward some solutions because they have the stuff in their brains. And with some brief conversations with each other and then sharing broadly, we can narrow that down. So let me ask you, think about some of your best podcasts, okay? Were they off-the-cuff questions, or had you done preparation? You think about, what is it, extemporaneous speaking. People think that means, or extemporaneous, that you're just standing up and just talking off the cuff, right? Or ad-libbing, or whatever the other word is.
Speaking off the cuff.
When you do stand-up. Whatever that word is.
What is that?
Improv.
Yeah.
Impromptu. No, extemporaneous speaking is often research-based, grounded in a route where you're going to move people, to do a transfer of learning. You're wanting them to get an idea or a concept, but it's not written down word for word. You're not reciting or reading a speech. So I would have you think about what worked best, what works best, and how comfortable you are, because you're setting the stage for the person in this chair to either feel really relaxed and able to think of and respond anecdotally, sharing ideas and experiences they've had, which then help your listeners, or you're giving a message of, well, I'm going to ask you these questions and we're going to march forward. So, that would be, because I don't know the answer to your question.
You called it contributory
agenda.
Contributory agenda.
Yeah.
Meaning that you have something to add to the body of knowledge that your guest brings to the conversation.
Well, the audience will add. I mean, I'll bring some ideas, some starters.
I am
then
kind
I'll
of
ask
part of the
them
audience in
questions.
these interviews.
Yeah, you are.
I represent the audience, essentially.
And you have an opened mindset for growth. I can tell that in talking with you.
Yeah.
You have
That's the title of the podcast, Being Built. I mean, it's about growing,
Yeah.
Yeah. That's deep, man. I wish I had another hour to get into that. Thanks for doing this with me, Brian.
You're welcome.
Appreciate the conversation.
Glad to be here.
Well done.
Alrighty.